Claudia her legs. Gets up and down things so easily. Well, it's pretty dreary weather, huh? I apologize for that. Poe would like it. Or the Raven, at least, would like it. Nevermore. Claudia Bester, whom you just saw scrambling about the stage, is responsible for these readings in many ways, and I'm so grateful to her. And she takes care of everything, and she usually handles the weather well. But tonight is an exception, and we forgive her for that. Is she here? She must be here someplace. The Hammer's an old sponsor of the readings, and of course now the readings are named for it. But they go way back to the Sunset Recreation Center days, when a couple of you at least were here in those days. And we occasionally went from the reading in the Buenos Aires room down to the swimming pool. But we don't talk about that. Armen, who is a famous swimmer, would have enjoyed that. Well, thank you all for braving the weather, or I guess by now it's the climate, isn't it? Not the weather, but by coming to raise your spirits at a poetry reading. I don't know, could things be any worse than they are? I mean, weather aside. Well, I'm sorry. Oh, well, no, we're waiting. Yeah, I think it's now an even worse bomb. No, I mean, I looked at the headline of a newspaper. I still take a newspaper. I won't see how many of you do, because I don't want to be depressed. But the headline this morning was "Bad Flu Getting Worse." Yeah, okay. After all these fires, right out of Revelation, we're getting atmospheric rivers. Where did these names come from? I never saw one in the old days. And we've got debris flows, right? Not mud flows, but debris flows. You can get in the head by the flows. It hurt. Anyway, the good news, well, no, there isn't any. I'm sorry to mislead you, but there is. What I just did was a piece of metanoia, which I might return to in just a few minutes. There is good news. The particular house we have tonight, when so many people, alas, are out of theirs, we have, thanks to Armen Davoudian, and we have a whole palace, the Palace of 40 Pillars, whose title refers us to a 16th century palace, whose name I'm not going to say because I will botch it, but it's one that Armen was familiar with in his youth. And as you know, many of you, a poem or a book of poems is, by virtue of an old metaphor, traceable in English back to Chaucer, and more recently in verse to Auden and James Merrill and Elizabeth Bishop. A poem is a house, right? As the word stanza. Of course, stanza in Italian is a room. And so you put a bunch of rooms together, and you get a house that you get to design and to build. Of course, the house is always inevitably something else, something other. Freud says, of course, being Freud, that the house is always the original place, the original dwelling, the womb. Which makes perfect sense. But in as much as it is a house, it implies a careful construction solidly made with columns or pillars, which in verse will be rhymes and stanzas and quatrains, couplets, and even some small houses or poems in themselves, as in the case of, say, the sonnet sequence, a couple of which are in Armen's book. One of those sequences is a version of the Crown of Sonnets, which, as some of you will know, is a sonnet sequence in which the last line of one poem is picked up as the first line of the following poem, and they go on like that and make a little crown. So I've lost my place in my writing here. So I'm going to say that we have some other forms here too, because Armen's a wonderful formalist poet, and these include a Persian form, the ghazal, which is a wonderful form, finally to have been brought over into English, I think, within the last 20 to 30 years. And now many people are writing it, and it has a wonderful, intricate appeal. And these various forms are represented in wonderfully varied ways in Armen's book. The Persian palace behind it all has 20 pillars, but the pillars reflected in a pool in front of it, as I understand it, become 40 for the poet, because the poet sees, of course, the reflections in the pool of the pillars. And poets are always reflecting, and Armen does a lot of reflecting himself, of course. And these little houses of his, are peopled with people from his family, his mother, his father, others. And friends from childhood and later. And there's an interesting phrase in a poem that is titled for another house, which I think was his own home when he was a child. It's called 27 Marjan Street. The line I have in mind is, a house inside that child inside that house, which indicates the structure of some of these intricate works. And I was going to say something about the vignettes in which these people appear, but I'm not going to do that. It's better to hear it right from Armen than from me. So I've changed my mind. And the changing of mind, by the way, is a figure that Armen's very interested in. You want to keep an eye out for it when it happens in the poems. It's called metanoia, and that's one name for it. It's also known as correctio, and there are several other wonderful academic names for it. But it's the word for a change of mind, or in mid-sentence, in a piece of prose, or especially in a poem. And the change can be an extraordinary transformation of some sort, or it can just be a change of thought. A very useful tool in the writer's craft. And Armen's poems are very warm, as you will see, and touching, but they are also right down to the last rivet. Very well made poems, very crafty poems. So get ready for it. Armen, can you come up?
Hi. Thank you, Stephen. That was a lovely introduction. I was taking notes on everything you said so I can add it to my dissertation on metanoia. It's a pleasure to be here in LA, and I'm grateful to Shannon and Claudia and the Hammer Museum and Stephen and everyone else involved in making this possible. Let me plunge in with a poem, and I will incorporate more chit-chat in between. This is a poem about the first apartment we moved to here in LA when my family and I got here from Iran. It was up in La Crescenta on I think Ramsdale, but I forget the address. Anyway, this is called Coming Out of the Shower. I shut my eyes under the scalding stream, scrubbing off last night's dream, when suddenly I hear your voice again, as though it caught in the clogged drain and was sent bubbling back up from the other world where you're not my mother. This time, it's really you. I'm really here. I blink. We do not disappear. Dad left, you say, to shower at the shop, so I don't need to stop just yet. And yet I do, unable to resume old customs, unlike you. In a one-bath, 4-person household, we learn what we mustn't see, growing in time, so coolly intimate with one another's silhouette behind the opaque, frosted shower screen that once more stands between us two. While at the mirror you apply foundation and concealer, I wash out my hair with rosewater shampoo, which means I'll smell like you all day. Mama, I shout, I'm coming out. And as you look away, I knot around me tight your lavender robe de chambre, cinching my waist, and clamber out of the tub, taking care not to step outside the cotton mat and drip on the cracked floor you've polished with such zeal. We are mirrored in each tile. Yet, you'd forgive the spillage or forget. What else will you love me despite? I wasn't going to read this, but since you mentioned it, Steve, this poem, 27 Marjan Street, it's in one of those French forms that have a lot of repetition. I forget which one exactly, but you were talking about the etymology of stanza. In Persian, ghazals, which is sort of the most popular form in Persian poetry, they end with a refrain, and the name for that refrain is radif. And the word radif has a weird, interesting etymology. It's related to an Arabic word for the person who rides behind another person on a horse, so the second rider. So this is sort of the repetition that comes at the end of the second line. And I guess I'm thinking now about the contrast between that sort of nomadic riding versus the solidity of a house in an English poem. This is about our apartment back in Isfahan, Iran. 27 Marjan Street. The rooms shrink down with each new coat of paint. The house stays calm. The child inside the house is also calm, face tucked into mother's blouse. But the rooms shrink down with each new coat of paint. Though the house is gone, the walls will not relent. No more a child at every new impasse. You shrink the rooms with coat on coat of paint, to a house inside that child, inside that house. Okay. One of my favorite poets in English, James Merrill, has a poem about a swan called the Black Swan, and it ends with, "I love the black swan." So this poem is titled "The Yellow Swan." At noon, the petaled swans, afloat midstream or parked at the water's rim, find the boy first in line, or there before there is a line, and always the nice boatman lets him mount his favorite ride, whose name defies all rust and wear. He whispers, "I love the yellow swan," a secret he knows better than to share, save in the hollow, ear-like curve of that arched neck, whose mirror image breaks and rings of water as he climbs between the wings and petals from the pier, a trail of molted plumage shuddering in his wake. The river foams, churned by the paddle wheel and changed to ocean, its surface cut by the question mark of the swan, no, dragon, gliding on the hissing, blood-stained waters as he turns fire on darkness, almost wins his mission, while his parents chat in the sun, unaware of all that burns down on the other bank. But like most love, the swan ride is cut off. The stroke of 1 o'clock returns the beast to boat, the boat to boatman. He hates the boatman. He hates his parents, whom he won't forgive. He hates the girl who's next. Poor boy, he hates the yellow swan. Live, laugh, hate, I guess. This is a ghazal about the morality police in Iran who are in charge of enforcing the hijab, and they're also known as Vice Squad. There's a couple of Persian cuss words here, and it ends with a quotation from Hitler about the Armenian genocide. Vice Squad. When the black van pulled over, my hand was in yours. They thought I was your lover. My hand was in yours. When she yanked up your headscarf, when you fell to the ground, when the lights loomed above her, my hand was in yours. When they marched us here, when we crossed or drowned in your namesake river, my hand was in yours. A grown man, my son, binamus, haram, lest the fateful discover, my hand was in yours. When old Jolfa was burning and drunk on fear, we are still hungover, my hand was in yours. You were the wife of Lot, I was the salt of your body. Though I'm not a believer, my hand was in yours. Who speaks of the Armenians? Let our gravestones crumble, so they can uncover, my hand was in yours. Coffee. Planted, ripened, hand-picked, dried, seeded, skinned, polished, and sorted, lesser crops disqualified, the balance graded and exported, tasted or rather analyzed by slurping, then expectorated, roasted until pyrolyzed, ground up, potted, irrigated, simmered, poured, sipped, and inverted, sedimented, and reverted, read, and wildly fabricated, happy or sad, single or mated, and if illegible, no matter. The future is always black and bitter. It's always the optimist. This is a poem about the first Trump presidency, I guess, and it has some quotations from Robert Frost, and also recalls, Middlebury, the college in Vermont, they have these great language programs where you can spend, I think 6 weeks studying a language, and you take a language oath to speak only the language you're there to study, which in my case was German 101. Okay. Something there is that doesn't love. We are in Deutsche Camp, which is a tasteless joke my friend with the undercut trolls out of history like a limp goldfish pulled out of his bowl. In fact, we're in Middlebury, Vermont, summer of 14, and I have vowed to unlearn English for 6 weeks so I can get more Rilke and an A. But mostly we play soccer, shirtless against the shirts, and afterward we screw, as 20-somethings do. We even fall in love, whispering in the dark of the campus graveyard under the sacred oath of German 101, Ich liebe dich, mein Liebling, und ich dich liebe auch. Weekends, we go to Ripton to hike the Robert Frost Interpretive Trail. Yes, there's a wood with a road splitting in it, a pile of timber forever rotting with the burning of decay, for the world will end in fire. And last, the wall. Its faded placard reads, Something there is that doesn't love. It's 2016. All that is history. Now I know Lieben from Leben, and Rilke in German feels like a fish out of water. The president believes good fences make good neighbors. The roads remain divided. Undercuts are in. Something that doesn't love burns on the streets again. Just check my time. I'd love to read to you some of the, so as Steve mentioned, there is this, I don't think it was a residential palace, it was maybe a party palace, because there are no rooms. It's just this long, this big pavilion with 20 pillars that are reflected in a central pool in Isfahan. It's called Chelsotun, which means the palace, translates to the palace of 40 pillars. And so I thought I might write 20 sonnets about this concept. And I love how sonnets have that kind of imperfect having or mirroring into an octave and a sestet, 8 and 6. So these poems kind of play with that, and when they can, or when I could, I incorporate a refrain into the middle where the turn should be. Okay. The Palace of 40 Pillars. 20 pillars drip into the pool their likenesses, where the likeness of a boy wavers among the clouds, eyeing the boy who's waiting for another. All is dual. 2 rows of roses frame the pond. In twos, the swans glide, each on another's breast, then fuse in a headless embrace. All is dissolved. The boy outside the water is no more a boy inside the water. His no more, the face defaced by its own lines on shattered waves overlapping like a rose, the tattered pillars strewn like petals. All is halved, severed, like home and school, like love and being loved. The boy no more than a way of seeing. Wake-up call. I can see my mother, apron over her nightgown, setting the table for breakfast, a stack of lavash steaming at the center. Honey and milk skin, feta with fruit, chickpea and chicken mash dusted with cinnamon. I can see my father, already in his coveralls and cap, filling a cup to the brim with hot tap water and emptying that cup into another, and emptying that cup into another, until all 3 are warmed for tea. I can hear the kettle whistling and pull the covers tight around my head against the coming light. For any moment now, they will open the door and lift the covers and find that I'm not there. The Book of Kings. The Book of Kings is, or Shahnameh is maybe the most famous Persian epic, possibly culturally the equivalent of the Iliad or the Odyssey, but much later. So in this poem, I pretend to be reading the Book of Kings as a child. Not quite true. But I lie in my room reading, while their tense, angry voices, lowered to a murmur, seep through the door. In the book, a warrior ends another's life and strips him of his armor, an heirloom armlet glinting underneath. It's just a book, but every time I read, it ends with the same fight. He kills his son, then covers him in gold-embroidered cloth. I'm young enough to cry, but old enough to shut my eyes as soon as the door swings open and my father tiptoes in to say good night. He pulls the Book of Kings out of my hands, takes my glasses off to kiss my head, and tucks me into bed. Okay. This is a poem about that mentions the inventors of the Armenian alphabet, otherwise known as the Holy Translators. Is there anything? Oh, a pasha is a term for a high-ranking official in the Ottoman army, I guess. Holy Translators. I'll always be in love with Father Dikran. I'll wear a long black robe and never marry. I'll stroke my bushy beard and lecture on the holy translators of the 5th century who invented the Armenian alphabet to record the Bible. To translate means to carry from one place to another, like a jet. We are their inheritors in this Muslim country. We brought the printing press to Isfahan. We introduced oil lamps in Austria. We put the first rover on the moon. And when the Turks marched us to Syria, we sent a student my age to Berlin to plant a bullet in the Pasha's brain. When I was growing up, I attended an Armenian school in Iran, and our classes were taught in Persian, but all of my classmates and I spoke Armenian, which our teachers didn't. So it became kind of a very helpful code language during exams or anything. This poem is called Cheat Sheet. In my all-boys school, they're all dumber than me. I sit in the back and read André Gide inside the elements of chemistry. I draw a naked girl with pointy breasts for my classmates, who fold her into a plane and fly it across the room. For the midterm, I make a cheat sheet in Armenian, which our Persian teachers cannot read. When the others leave, I meet with a friend to study. Behind the stacks, he unbuttons his uniform and then lies down. Leaning over his body like Ali Baba over the thief's treasure, I copy out the answers on his chest with what I know, even then, is too much pleasure. Okay. So as I was working on these sort of sonnets, trying to incorporate various forms of refrain and repetition, I thought I might try something different. And so this poem it only uses the letters in the word pomegranate, and it's called Pomegranate Anagram. Grandpa, no more. Grandma, no more. Nor mama, nor papa, near. Amo ergo pango. O pomegranate, tear apart to wrap a protean argot to a tap-tap meter. No monotone to trap me a meager poem. No tame game, nor mere program. Tap an engram to reap a pomegranate anagram to earn me pure agon. Part ear, part peep. Part open, part tangram. Part germane, part perm. Te amo, pero no me amas. Mope not. O pomegranate, grant me great amor, not agape. Ear, ego, am no man. O garnet page, O mater mea eterna, name me Armen, name me poet. Amen. There's this linguistic term, semantic satiation, which is when you repeat something so many times that it ceases to mean anything, it becomes noise. And I've always wanted to somehow work that into poems, so I guess that was my attempt. And let's see. You might be familiar with those sort of parallel text editions of translated works that give one language on one side and the other on the other side. And I've always loved those. So this is a poem about a medieval Persian romance, Layli and Majnun. Majnun's name means mad, because he went mad with his love for Layli. And this poem is called Facing Pages. Reading a parallel text tragedy, Persian and English on opposite sides, like lovers whom an ancient grudge divides. I think of gentle Mr. Javadi copying the cloudy verses out in white as I followed with blue meanings where he led, and we alternated, trying to keep straight, till the blackboard was striped like the bedspread I sweated my pent-up love out on each night, then lay there with my hands unwashed and read the story of Majnun's forbidden love, which sent him roaming deserts in search of the sweet beloved he would never reach. When I closed the book, two tongues touch. Let me read a couple new poems. I mentioned, I guess, the etymology of Majnun's name. Layli's name means night, or is related to the Arabic for night. And I had an ex who had a cat, who was a black cat, and the cat's name was Layl, or night. So this is in homage to that cat. 3 nights. It's morning where I was born, but night unravels here in the Western Hemisphere, reveries of return. Always the same old story. Here, there, now, then, love, pain. You'll never go home again. It will always be tomorrow in the country of the past, where a tyrant breaks his fast. There's time yet left to fight. This is the first night. And the night that's only mine, leather, jasmine, and wine, as my face lies abreast the sunset in your chest, or nuzzles your armpit, semen, sweat, and spit, mullah and vartabet, my God is in my bed. Majnun and Majnun, let's sleep in until noon. Let flesh block out the light. This is the second night. And at the foot of the bed, the third night rests its head up against his paws. Lel, who defies the laws of Eshq, Amor, romance, like us a bundle of wants, and wears, like us, no pants, sleeps neutered and alone, may yet live many months, and yet may die today. Let there never be light. This is the final night. Go back to this book. Now, I miss the days when there was no book and you could just print this out and didn't have to rummage through. You're like, yeah, right. My grandpa was an amateur carpet dealer. He died when a couple years after we'd moved here, and sadly I couldn't go back to go to his funeral. And so this is a poem in his memory. It incorporates some sayings in Persian and Armenian, and I've always loved. I love what happens when you translate like a colloquialism from one language to another, and it sounds absolutely insane. So if it starts not making sense, that's what's happening. This is called Rug Game. This is before your rugs and you were gone. We are treading the woven streets of Isfahan. My cousins, you and I, parents away, while we sneak from faded Jolfa to LA. Among the fallen cypresses, we pass friendly gazelles grazing on knotted grass. Redundant roses kiss our sockless feet, and silent nightingales sing to their beat. Where have you stashed the green, unsmiling mullah? I forgot to say that the toman or rial, a lot of them carry the face of a mullah, and he would hide them under these rugs, and we'd go around trying to find them. Where have you stashed the green, unsmiling mullah? I'll be the first one to dig up the mullah. Clouds and camels, amulets of eyes, dust bunnies, cigarette butts, and 2 dead flies. Look, it's here, tucked under the trellised band. I always found it, just as you had planned. From rugs to riches, Kashan to Heriz, you made it seem like money grew on trees. Of course it did. You could do everything, thumbing our days like beads along a string. Rug game, car ride, ice cream, bedtime story. A farting mullah, plot twist, a disguised huri. And bedtime, no. Courage, my boy, my heart, light of my eyes, my liver, my every part. May the mouse eat you. May God burn your father. I am your shoelace, and I guard your weather. I've lost the thread, Grandpa, as I lost you. Too cheap. The ends don't meet. Just say what's true. The ends don't meet, but you have met your end. A burn hole I might patch, but cannot mend. I'm going to do 2 more. This poem is titled Persian Poetry. I teach Robert Lowell to undergraduates at an elite institution. My colleagues and I study poverty, race, the conspiracy of language, and the moral imperative of art. You pinch your thumb and index finger into the obscene gesture for peace, while the endowed lecture on the figure of the otter in modern British poetry continues. Your face is suitably hairy and preoccupied, your hand placed absurdly high on your thigh. The words are dull, unfashionable. Positionality, Englishness, paradigm shift, otherness. The wordplay cheap and without tact. You are taking dutiful notes on your electronic notebook. Ambiguity, imperial construct, Republican feminism. Your knuckles are furred, like my father's, balling his socks one inside the other and tossing them on the bed for my mother to collect later. I believe in nothing more than love. I write in English because I grew up speaking Persian. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to read this last poem, and then I'll join Stephen in the hot seat. There are these clothing-optional hot springs in Northern California, northern San Francisco, founded by a poet. I forget his full name, but his last name is Harbin. So this recalls a visit to that place. Hot springs. Afloat out on the starlit water, where life outside is a vague dream, as to 2 figures in a frame, I touch the moon and watch it shatter. But when I touch you, you remain, my body weightless in your arms, as quietly your hand conforms to the gnarled griefs along my spine. Beneath the sky's unseeing eyes, I let my head rest in your palm, making a little world of calm, where those who are lucky can revise scenes too early to recall. The frightened mouth, the soured breast, abandoned den or splintered nest resurfaced in the lover's pool. So let our bodies intersect like children whose fingers cross to make a promise less and guard each moment from the next. And now, before you disappear, I've brought us once again to soak in sulfur, salt, and arsenic, so that in here we're always there. Thank you.
Let me ask you about your epigraph from Adorno.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to ask you anything
Okay.
deep. I don't know Adorno very well, and I don't think
Same here. Yeah.
I'm looking for it because it's not complicated. It's very short, but it's ambiguous. There's so much to do. So many things to have. A book.
I can read the epigraph if you want. Okay, you found them.
Read it. I think you'll give it away.
Okay.
Go ahead.
It's really long. Adorno said, "The house is past."
Thank you.
Yeah.
The house is past.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, as you realize, a motif through the poems: the house, the home, the dwelling, the palace, etc. The house is past. Now, I'm not sure what that means, and I'd like to know what you think it means in terms of your book.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that Adorno wrote a little bit about houses, and I think when he was writing about houses, he had in mind the relationship between the house and capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's talking about possessions and what we can do with the house in terms of capitalism in the future. But I'm not sure that's what it means for you. And I mean, it could mean the house is gone. It's a thing of the past, as Adorno means in a sense, I think. Or it could mean the house is the past.
Mm-hmm.
It's where we put things in our memories. Or it could mean, I guess, something else. And I was just curious about what you might have in mind there.
Yeah. I guess let me preface this by saying I feel like it's one thing I like about poetry is you get to be maybe intellectually responsible in a way that one doesn't get to be as a critic. So I don't.
I'll ask you to explain that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, it's less maybe, for me at least, about finding what something meant and more about what it meant to me or to whoever the writer is at the moment. So this is from Adorno's weird book, Minima Moralia, where written while he was an expat in LA, and he's just kind of, there are these brief vignettes, meditations on everyday objects, like, you know, he opens a taxi door and then you get a meditation on his hand interacting with the handle and what that means. And so I think at least for this, I was thinking of how I don't know, like the kind of the risk that maybe inheres in any kind of belonging, that it's defined by exclusion. Allow a house as walls. It's meant to keep you is meant as much to keep you in as to keep other things out. And as much as at the time I felt like a lot of this book was about missing home and kind of indulging in all kinds of nostalgia about home and Iran and the past. So I kind of wanted to acknowledge maybe the more sinister aspects of that, reinforcing boundaries and borders, and yeah.
And at the same time, you get a house to go with the palace, and
That's right.
yeah. So it's a kind of bonus for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. So it's really a rich quote for you. I mean, it means a lot that it would not necessarily mean to your reader who is not as familiar with Adorno as you are. Which,
Sure.
fine.
Yeah, I think kind of.
It's
No, I like epigraphs and how they just sort of are plunked down on the page, and I don't know, maybe in their form they enact what I was telling about intellectual irresponsibility, is that they're extracted and contextless, right?
yes,
like
yes.
surrounded by white space, kind of like a poem.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's a richer answer than I expected. Do any of you have any questions right now, or do you want me to ask more questions, which I could always do? But yes, Eduardo.
I'm interested in your creative process. Do you tend to think in your native?
Oh, well, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you, there are people, magical elves, with speaking devices that they will provide you with. So be patient, we'll work it out.
Hi. I'm interested in your creative process. For example, when you're starting a poem, do you tend to think in your native language? Or how's the process?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Often not, because I guess my creative process tends to be very, I don't know, contentless and kind of married to little accidents in language and like rhyme or string of words or. But I do sometimes. There's a poem here I didn't read about visual snow or static. Snow as a term for visual static that you would get like back in the days of analog TV. The days programming would end, you'd get like black and white dots on the TV. And then if you were watching some channels in Iran, it would play the national anthem and sort of stream the flag, and then the flag would dissolve into snow. Very ominous. And I love that the term for that in Persian is barfak, which means little snow. And I think in French too is referred to as neige. So I love when there are instances like that where there's like sort of almost like a lucky coincidence that then I can tap into Persian. But yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi, thanks for the reading. Most writers poets writing in English don't rhyme nowadays. So I'm wondering what your feeling is, your relationship to rhyme, and if that has anything to do with the fact that maybe Armenian poetry does, or your original language is, predisposed you to rhyme.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a kind of a renaissance of maybe, if not rhyme, then at least forms in poetry. Like the book that won the Pulitzer a couple of years ago was Diane Seuss's Frank sonnets. There are poets like Terence Hayes or Jericho Brown and A. Stallings writing in form and rhyme and meter. But yes, I do think that now Like you're right that rhyme isn't a neutral. It's a choice maybe, and I don't know is it related. I mean, the ghazal is very refrain laden and rhymey, but it's also sort of easy to do that in Persian. I think we were talking about. Someone was asking me what's the hardest question I've gotten at a Q&A, and once I was asked how many vowels there are in Persian versus English, and how does that affect translation. So I looked this up, and English has almost 2 to 3 times the number of vowels. Not like the letters, but the actual sound. As Persian, which does make rhyming harder, because there's a greater variation and difference. And,
In English.
in English,
Yeah.
right. And the word order is less flexible. All of that aside, there is, I think, aesthetically maybe less of a tolerance for purely decorative formal flourishes. We always tend to justify, even in somebody like Shakespeare or Emily Dickinson, we look for reasons for formal choices. That it can't be, that somehow there needs to be something in the subject matter that justifies it. So I'm rambling now, but I think that that's something I like about rhyme. And another thing, I guess I think what I like about poetry is what you can get from it that you can't get in prose or discursive prose or even songs and whatnot. And for me, one of those is sound patterning and repetition and rhyme, and not just as a linguistic thing, but also as a way of thinking. I feel like I'm constantly backing myself into corners in a poem, and then have to stop thinking and listen and sort of brainstorm in terms of sound rather than meaning. And I think rhymes helps.
So you don't feel pro or con about rhyming. It's something you do most of the time, but you don't feel that one should do it, or that poetry is the richer for it. Or do you?
I think given the fact, I think generally yes, but because
yes, poetry
rhyme it has been so denigrated ever since Milton, who called it, what is it, the jingling of like endings.
Yeah.
There's a Renaissance rhetorician, John Hoskins, who calls rhyme the whore of Babylon. So I do feel like maybe it is important to take a stance and be pro rhyme, but in general, no. I think.
Well, rhyme has changed so much, hasn't it, since Milton's day? I mean, people like Merrill, for example, Bishop.
Yeah.
To take your 2 examples, or Angie Malenko, or Stallings. Rhymes were fewer, I think, in Milton's day because people didn't like the unusual rhyme. And the polysyllabic rhyme was almost always funny. Now it needn't be. So I think our attitudes toward rhyme have changed a lot. And the people that you mentioned a while ago and that I was just talking about have really made rhyme again, I think, in our day. I'm very interested myself to see it making a kind of comeback. And it's rhyme in English can be very adventurous, and it's a heuristic thing, will lead you to think not of the many words that might rhyme with do, you, blue, new, etc., but of new words that we would never think of as rhyming, but they do. And anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You didn't ask me, and I shouldn't have answered it. We need a microphone.
Hi, Armen, hi. Are you getting my voice?
Hi, yes.
Yeah. So I enjoyed listening to you quite a lot, and I think I can say we're hamshari.
Okay. Yeah. Salam.
Okay, salam. And I just wanted to, you read from the 40 Pillars and the King of Kings, the Book of Kings, as you call them. Who was the translator for these? For these that you quoted? Yeah, and I'm forgetting now because I'm losing my memory. But who the 40 Pillars was written by whom? That's it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I should have mentioned. So the Palace of 40 Pillars is not. It's a palace. It's a So it wasn't. I mean, it's not a book written by someone. The Shahnameh, or the Book of Kings, and then the Layli and Majnun, Nizami Ganjavi's poem, were translated into English by Dick Davis, whom I should have mentioned because I love his translations. He finds somehow magically formal equivalents for, the Shahnameh is written in rhyming couplets, and Davis somehow manages to recreate that. Similarly with Layli and Majnun, I'm trying to remember this beautiful couplet he has where he compares, just going back to our former question, he compares when Majnun is roaming the desert and he's alone, he compares him to a line of verse without a rhyme. That it's just kind of, he's stranded and doesn't have his pair. I love Dick Davis's translations, and he has this amazing essay also on the question of rhyme called On Not Translating Hafez, where he talks about why for the longest time he refused to translate lyric poetry because it's so rhyme dependent and difficult to recreate, and it's a great essay. Highly recommended. So, yeah.
That's all the time we have for audience questions. I want to let you know that we have copies of Armen's debut book of poetry, The Palace of 40 Pillars, available for purchase, and he's going to be signing them there. So if you have further questions, you could chat with him at the signing table. And thank you so much to both of you for reading tonight.